So picture this. It's the spring of 1940. The world is holding its breath. And then France, a global superpower, one of the victors of World War I, with this huge, respected army, just collapses. It's completely defeated by Nazi Germany in a way that nobody, and I mean nobody, saw coming. How long did it take? 46 days. That's it. From the first tanks rolling across the border on May 10th to the final signature on an armistice on June 22nd. We're talking about just over 6 weeks for a major world power to just fall. So that's the big question we're tackling today, right? How on earth did this happen? I mean, this wasn't just losing a battle. This was a complete and total collapse. A collapse that literally changed the map of Europe and kicked off the absolute darkest chapter of the Second World War. To really get why this was so shocking, you've got to understand what everyone was expecting. Because on paper, France and its allies looked pretty tough. And get this, you might think the French were just outgunned, but that's not the case at all. Believe it or not, the Allies had more tanks, and a lot of them were technically better than the German panzers. They had way more artillery, too. So this isn't a simple story of a bigger army beating up a smaller one. Nope. This battle was going to be won on ideas, not just numbers. And this is really where it all begins, with two completely different playbooks for how this war was about to go down. Okay, so on one side, you've got the Allies with their Dial plan. Basically, they thought the Germans would pull the exact same move they did in 1914, charge through central Belgium. So their whole strategy was to rush their best troops into Belgium and form a strong defensive line. It was solid, it was logical, and it was completely predictable. And then you have the Germans and their Manstein plan. This thing was the complete opposite, a wild, high-stakes gamble. The idea was to send a smaller force into Belgium as bait to draw all those elite Allied soldiers north. But the real punch, the main event, would be a massive armored force smashing its way through the Ardennes forest, a region the Allies thought was totally impassable for tanks. And when you look at the numbers, you can see why the Allies were so confident. They had more tanks, more artillery pieces. From their point of view, the Dial plan made perfect sense. But that confidence, well, it was built on a really, really bad assumption. You see, the Germans had no interest in refighting the last war. They were about to unleash a brand new one, and the whole thing depended on one crazy idea working. And this quote, this one really says it all. The French High Command, guys who were heroes in World War I, like Pétain, they just looked at the Ardennes and thought, no way, you can't get an army of tanks through there. They thought it was a total fantasy, and because of that, they left it barely defended. Now, to be fair, it was an insane logistical challenge. The Germans created traffic jams that were literally hundreds of kilometers long. Their tank columns were just sitting ducks for any kind of air attack. But here's the thing. French intelligence saw reports of this massive buildup, and they just dismissed it. They were so sure the main attack was in Belgium that they completely missed their chance to stop it. And the engine powering this whole gamble was a new concept. Blitzkrieg. Lightning War. And it wasn't just about tanks going fast. It was like a symphony of destruction. You had tanks, motorized infantry, artillery, and, this is the key part, dive bombers, all working together, all coordinated by radio, moving at a speed the enemy just could not react to. The moment that really broke the French line wasn't about tanks at all. It was about air power. At the key river crossing at Sedan, the German Luftwaffe just hammered the French defenders. It was the heaviest air attack the world had ever seen. The psychological shock was unbelievable. Morale just evaporated. The defense crumbled before the main German force even got across the river. So once they broke through at Sedan, the game changed. The German tanks didn't stop to mop up. They just drove. They raced west as fast as they could with only one goal in mind, the English Channel. This move became known as the Sichelschnitt, the sickle cut. And it's a perfect name. The German armored column was the blade of the sickle. It swung right behind the Allied armies that had charged into Belgium, just as planned. Suddenly, the best troops the Allies had were completely cut off, their supply lines gone. They were trapped. By May 16th, the Allied leaders were starting to realize just how bad things were. Winston Churchill flew to Paris for an emergency meeting and asked the French commander, General Gamelin, a very simple and very urgent question. And Gamelin's reply? Just one word. Aucune. Which means none. They had no reserve. Nothing. They'd sent everything they had into Belgium, right into the trap. The very troops they needed to stop this breakthrough were now the ones who were cut off. In that one devastating word, you can feel the moment the battle was truly lost. What followed that encirclement was the incredible, desperate evacuation from the beaches of Dunkirk. The number of soldiers they managed to rescue is just mind-boggling. Over 338,000 Allied troops were pulled off those beaches. But, and this is a huge but, they left everything else behind. All their tanks, all their artillery, all their trucks. The best armies the Allies had were now effectively disarmed. After Dunkirk, with its best forces gone, the Battle of France moved into its final, tragic phase. On June 5th, the Germans launched Case Red, the second part of their invasion. And while some French units fought incredibly bravely, the fight was already over. To avoid its destruction, Paris was declared an open city. German troops marched down the Champs-Élysées on June 14th. Just a week later, France surrendered. And Hitler decided to rub salt in the wound with this incredible moment of symbolic revenge. He had the actual train car where Germany surrendered in 1918 dragged out of a museum and brought to the exact same spot in the forest. For him, this wasn't just about winning a war, it was about humiliating his old enemy. So let's pull all this together. How did France fall? And fall so fast? Well, it wasn't about having fewer tanks. It was about a completely new way of using them. So when you boil it all down, Germany won because of a brilliant, surprising strategy and a revolutionary new way of fighting. Their command and control was just on another level, especially their use of radios to let tanks and planes talk to each other in real time. The Allies were fighting a slow, methodical war from the past, and they just got run over. And if you want to see just how brutally efficient this new kind of war was, look at the casualties. The Germans lost fewer soldiers in this entire 6-week conquest of France than they did in the single, bloody Battle of Verdun back in World War I. The era of trench warfare was dead. Lightning War was here. But here's the kicker. We have to remember this whole thing was a massive, insane gamble. A lot of German generals thought the Manstein Plan was totally reckless and was going to be a disaster, which leaves us with a pretty chilling what if, doesn't it? What if a couple of French pilots had spotted those traffic jams in the forest? What if the Allied command had just reacted a bit faster? You have to wonder, how differently would the next 5 years of world history have played out?